I think we are concluding Coriolanus from Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough. But where the act is something out of the way, and extraordinary, and seems in a manner to demand some impulse of divine possession and sudden inspiration to account for it, here he does introduce divine agency, not to destroy, but to prompt the human will, not to create in us another agency, but offering images to stimulate our own, images that in no sort or kind make our action involuntary, but give occasion rather than to spontaneous action, aided and sustained by feelings and confidence and hope. For either we must totally dismiss and exclude divine influences from every kind of causality and origination in what we do, or else what other way can we conceive in which divine aid and cooperation can act? Certainly, we can not suppose that the divine beings actually and literally turn our bodies and direct our hands and our feet this way or that to do what is right. It is obvious that they must actuate the practical and elective element of our nature by certain initial occasions, by images presented to the imagination and thoughts suggested to the mind, such either as to excite it to or advert and withhold it from any particular course. In the perplexity which I have described, the Roman women went, some to other temples, but the greater part and ladies of the highest rank to the altar of Jupiter Capitolinus. Among these supplicants was Valeria, sister to the great Paplicola. They don't have Greek characters anywhere in here, so if I pronounce the names wrong, that's why. Himself was now deceased, as it is told in the history of his life, but Valeria lived still and enjoyed great respect and honor at Rome, her life and conduct no way disparaging her birth. She suddenly seized with the sort of instinct or emotion of mind which I have described, and happily lighting, not without divine guidance, on the right expedient, both rose herself and bade the others rise, and went directly with them to the house of Volumnia, the mother of Marcius, Coriolanus, and coming in and finding her sitting with her daughter-in-law, with which her little grandchildren on her lap, Valeria, then, surrounded by her female companions, spoke, in the name of them all. We, that now make our appearance, O Volumnia, and you, Vergilia, are come as mere women to women, not by direction of the Senate, or an order from the councils, or the appointment of any other magistrate, but the divine being himself, as I conceive, moved to compassion by our prayers, prompted us to visit you in a body and request a thing on which our own and the common safety depends, and which, if you consent to it, will raise your glory above that of the daughters of the Sabines, who won over their fathers and their husbands from the mortal enemy to peace and friendship. Arise and come with us to Marcius. Join our supplication and bear for your country this true and just testimony on her behalf, that, notwithstanding the many mischiefs that have been done her, yet she has never outraged you, nor so much as thought of treating you ill, in all her resentment, but does now restore you safe into his hands, though there be small likelihood she should obtain from him any equitable terms. The words of Valeria were seconded by the acclamations of the other women, to which Volumnia made answer, I and Vergilia, my countrywoman, have an equal share with you all in the common miseries, and we have the additional sorrow, which is wholly ours, that we have lost the merit and good fame of Marcius, and see his person confirmed rather than protected by the arms of the enemy, yet I account this the greatest of all misfortunes, if indeed the affairs of Rome be sunk to so feeble a state as to have their last dependence upon us, for it is hardly imaginable he should have any consideration left for us, when he has no regard for the country, which he was wont to prefer before his mother and wife and children. Make use, however, of our service, and lead us, if you please, to him. We are able, if nothing more, at least to spend our last breath in making suit for him, suit to him for our country. And so it's important, these group things, whatever the biological group, and to strip off all the extra sometimes and just man to man, woman to woman, child to child, whatever. And nowadays people feel like, well, too many people are using my non-physical pronouns, so I'm going to come up with another non-physical pronoun. And there are 70 official ones that they want you to learn in some public schools. But yeah, it's not just the men running about doing their thing. If the women aren't doing their thing, no matter, even if the men are really good at doing their thing, there's problems in society. So, this is honoring the position of the female. Well, at least the women. Having spoken thus, she took Virgilia by the hand and the young children, and so accompanied them to the Volscian camp. So lamentable a sight much affected the enemies themselves, who viewed them in respectful silence. Marcius was then sitting in his place, with his chief officers about him, and seeing the party of women advance toward them, wondered what should be the matter, but perceiving at length that his mother was at the head of them, he would fain have hardened himself in his former inexorable temper, but overcome by his feelings, and confounded at what he saw, he did not endure that they should approach him sitting in state, but came down hastily to meet them, saluting his mother first, and embracing her a long time, and then his wife and children, sparing neither tears nor caresses, but suffering himself to be borne away and carried headlong, as it were, by the impetuous violence of his passion. When he had satisfied himself, and observed that his mother, Volumnia, was desirous to say something, the Volscian council being first called in, he heard her to the following effect: "Our dress and our very persons, my son, might tell you, though we should say nothing ourselves, in how forlorn a condition we have lived at home since your banishment and absence from us. And now consider with yourself whether we may not pass for the most unfortunate of all women, to have that sight, which should be the sweetest that we could see, converted through I know not what fatality to one of all others the most formidable and dreadful, Volumnia to behold her son, and Virgilia her husband, in arms against the walls of Rome. Even prayer itself, whence others gain comfort and relief in all manner of misfortunes, is that which most aids to our confusion and distress, since our best wishes are inconsistent with themselves, nor can we at the same time petition the gods for Rome's victory and your preservation, but what the worst of our enemies would imprecate as a curse is the very object of our vows. Your wife and children are under the sad necessity they must either be deprived of you or of their native soil. As for myself, I am resolved not to wait till war shall determine this alternative for me, but if I cannot prevail with you to prefer amity prefer amity and concord to quarrel and hostility, and to be the benefactor of both parties, rather than destroyer of one of them. Be assured of this from me, and reckon steadfastly upon it, that you shall not be able to reach your country unless you trample first upon the course of her that brought you into life. For it will be ill in me to wait and loiter in the world till the day wherein I shall see a child of mine, either led in triumph by his own countrymen or triumphing over them. Did I require you to save your country by ruining the Volscians? Then, I confess, my son, the case would be hard for you to solve. It is base to bring destitution on our fellow citizens. It is unjust to betray those who have placed their confidence in us. But, as it is, we do but desire a deliverance, equally expedient for them and us, only more glorious and honorable on the Volscian side, who, as superior in arms, will be thought freely to bestow the two greatest of blessings, peace and friendship. And in some languages, the word peace also means wholeness, and other such things to accentuate peace, right? Even when they themselves receive the same, if we obtain these, the common thanks will be chiefly due to you as the principal cause. But if they be not granted, you alone must expect to bear the blame for both nations. The chance of all war is uncertain, yet thus much is certain in the present, that you, by conquering Rome, will only get the reputation of having undone your country. But if the Volscians happen to be defeated under your conduct, then the world will say that, to satisfy a revengeful humor, you brought misery on your friends and patrons. Marcius listened to his mother, while she spoke without answering her a word, and Volumnia, seeing him stand mute also for a long time after she had ceased, resumed. "O my son," said she, "what is the meaning of this silence? Is it a duty to postpone everything to a sense of injuries, and wrong to gratify mother in request like this? Is it characteristic of a great man to remember wrongs that have been done him, and not the part of a great and good man to remember benefits such as those that children receive from parents, and requite them with honor and respect? You, methinks, who are so relentless in the punishment of the ungrateful, should not be more careless than others to be grateful yourself. You have punished your country already. You have not yet paid your debt to me. Nature and religion, surely attended by any constraint, should have won your consent to petitions so worthy and so just as these. But if it must be so, I will even use my last resource." Having said this, she threw herself down at his feet, and did also as his wife and children, upon which Marcius, crying out, "O mother, what is it you have done to me?" raised her up from the ground, and pressing her right hand with more than ordinary vehemence, "You have gained a victory," said he, "fortunate enough for the Romans, but destructive for your son, whom you, though none else, have defeated." After which, in a little private conference with his mother and his wife, he sent them back again to Rome, as they desired of him. The next morning he broke up his camp, and led the Volscians homeward, variously affected with what he had done, some of them complaining of him and condemning his act, others who were inclined to a peaceful conclusion, unfavorable to neither. Now, right and wrong isn't necessarily something, what country seems to like it better, but there's certain conditions that perhaps we can say aren't right to impose upon other people. If it's self-defense, and okay, then you have to have a head tax or something like this when you conquer the people or something. Okay, but of course, the idea, we have to live in luxury forever, was what kind of seems to be implied, doesn't it? That these women were like, but before all this, we had more than the commoners, and now we're like, look at us, we're, our clothes aren't new, none of our clothes are new. It's like, okay. Well, I mean, they're not really saying that, but sometimes that's the complaint, because it's obviously the top women who are complaining. A third party, well, much disliking his proceedings, yet could not look upon Marcius as a treacherous person, but thought it pardonable in him to be thus shaken and driven to surrender at last under such compulsion. None, however, opposed his commands. They all obediently followed him, though rather from admiration of his virtue than any regard they now had to his authority. The Roman people, meantime, more effectually manifested how much fear and danger they had been in while the war lasted, by their deportment after they were freed from it. Those that guarded the walls had no sooner given notice that the Volscians were dislodged and drawn off, but they set open all their temples in a moment, and began to crown themselves with garlands and prepare for sacrifice, as they were wont to do upon tidings brought of any signal victory. But the joy and transport of the whole city was chiefly remarkable in the honors and marks of affection paid to the women, as well by the Senate as the people in general, everyone declaring that they were beyond all questions the instruments of the public safety, and the Senate, having passed a decree that whatsoever they would ask, in the way of any favor or honor, should be allowed and done for them by the magistrates. They demanded simply that a temple might be erected to female fortune. Getting rumbly in the tumbly here. The expense of which they offered to defray after their own contributions in the city would be at the cost of sacrifices and other matters pertaining to the due honor of the entities out of the common treasury. The Senate, much commending their public spirit, caused the temple to be built and a statue to be set up in it at the public charge. They, however, made up a sum among themselves for a second image of fortune, which the Romans say uttered, as it was putting up, words to this effect: blessed of the entities. Blessed of the gods, O women, is your gift. Now, I should, when it's quotes, I should, say it exactly and indicate that, well, I'm not, calling what they call gods, but, these words they profess were repeated a second time, expecting our belief, oh, it seems pretty nearly an impossibility. Blessed of the gods, O women, is your gift. It may be possible enough that statues may seem to sweat, and to run with tears, and to stand with certain dewy drops of a sanguine color. For timber and stones are frequently known to contract a kind of scurf and rottenness, productive of moisture, and various tints may form on the surfaces, both from within and from the action of the air outside. And by these signs, it is not absurd to imagine that the deity may forewarn us. It may happen also that the images and statues may sometimes make a noise not unlike that of a moan or groan. Sometimes they would make statues literally like some sort of a whistle or like bottles, so like if the wind blew just right, it would make a sound. Through a rupture or violent internal separation of the parts, but that an articulate voice and such express words and language so clear and exact and elaborate should proceed from inanimate things is, in my judgment, a thing utterly out of possibility. Well, some things don't happen on the physical level. Some things happen psychologically. Some things happen spiritually. So I'm not negating that some of that happens. Remember my experience like the Goetia, well, you know, the painting, these, like the Goetia seals, they came out, and the lead one said something to the effect of, I spoke behind an image, and the confusion became worship, basically. I don't remember exactly what it said. The 23rd, 17th Enochian Aether set of visions that I had. I shared that on the Enochian and the Vision playlists, I think. For it was never known that either the soul of man or the deity himself uttered vocal sounds and language alone, without an organized body and members fitted for speech, which, you know, it leads to, there's, I don't know if you call them theories or I guess you could say theories, because they are based on some sort of thing like that, where they say, well, spiritual language is like Enochian. You're going to find contractions, and you're going to find a bunch of vowels and a bunch of consonants strung together, and you know, so there's theories about, well, the spiritual beings, what language would they have, that, but the monotheist prophetic model is that these prophets come with the language of their time. So, you know, like, for example, all this gender language, they're not saying that the sun and the moon are male or female, that sort of stuff. They're, you know, they're using the language of that their people spoke. You know, they didn't invent a language. They didn't invent technical terms or some stuff like that, like a lot of spiritual leaders do nowadays. And I mean, I have my own dream language, but I'm certainly not thinking that it's for everybody or anything like that. It's a completely voluntary thing I take part in. But where history seems, in a manner, to force our assent by concurrence of numerous and credible witnesses, we are to conclude that an impression distinct from sensation affects the imaginative parts of our nature, and then carries away the judgment, so as to believe it to be a sensation, just as in sleep we fancy we see and hear without really doing either. Persons, however, whose strong feelings of reverence to the deity and tenderness for religion will not allow them to deny or invalidate anything of this kind. Well, you don't have to affirm every claim. Just sometimes, I don't know, you know, have certainly a strong argument for their faith in the wonderful and transcendent character of the divine power, which admits no manner of comparison with ours, either in its nature or its action. The modes are the strength of its operations. See, so there's divinity beyond these entities, that male and female entities that, you know, people call or treat as gods and goddesses. A lot of people say, oh, no, I'm not worshiping them. I'm really, you're calling them up, and you're, you know, it is no contradiction to reason that it should do things that we cannot do, and effect what for us is impracticable, differing from us in all respects, in its acts yet more than in other points. We may well believe it to be unlike us and remote from us. Knowledge of divine things, for the most part, as Heraclitus says, is lost to us by incredulity. When Marcius came back to Antium, Tullus, who thoroughly hated and greatly feared him, proceeded at once to contrive how he might immediately dispatch him, as if he escaped now, he was never likely to give him such another advantage. Having therefore got together and suborned several partisans against him, he required Marcius to resign his charge, and give the Volscians an account of his administration, he apprehending the danger of a private condition, while Tullus held the office of general, and exercised the greatest power among his fellow citizens, made answer that he was ready to lay down his commission whenever those from whose common authority he had received it should think fit to recall it, and that, in the meantime, he is ready to give the Entiates satisfaction as to all particulars of his conduct, if they were desirous of it. An assembly was called, and and popular speakers as had been concerted came forward to exasperate and incense the multitude. But when Marcius stood up to answer, the more unruly and tumultuous part of the people became quiet on a sudden, and out of reverence allowed him to speak without the least disturbance, while all the better people, and such as were satisfied with the peace, made it evident by their whole behavior that they would give him a favorable hearing, and judge and pronounce according to equity. Tullus, therefore, began to dread the issue of the defense he was going to make for himself, for he was an admirable speaker, and the former services he had done the Volscians and procured and so preserved for him greater kindness than could be outweighed by any blame for his late conduct. Indeed, the very accusation itself was a proof and testimony of the greatness of the merits, since people could never have complained or thought themselves wronged because Rome was not brought into their power, but that by his means they had come so near to taking it. For these reasons the conspirators judged it prudent not to make any further delays, nor to test the general feeling, but the boldest of their faction crying out that they ought not to listen to a traitor, nor allow him still to retain office and play the tyrant among them, fell upon Marcius in a body and slew him there, none of those that were present offering to defend him. But it quickly appeared that the action was in no wise approved by the majority of the Volscians, who hurried out of their several cities to show respect to his corpse, to which they gave honorable interment, adorning the sepulchre with arms and trophies, as the monument of a noble hero and a famous general. When the Romans heard tidings of his death, they gave no other signification, either of honor or of anger toward him, but simply granted the request of the women, that they might put themselves into mourning and bewail him for 10 months, as the usage was upon the loss of a father, or a son, or a brother, that being the period fixed for the longest lamentation by the laws of Numa Pompilius, as is more amply told in the account of him. Now, allowances, sure, but 10 months? That's quite a bit. Marcius was no sooner deceased, but the Volscians felt the need of his assistance. They quarreled first with the Aequians, their confederates and their friends, about the appointment of the generals of their joint forces, and carried their dispute to the length of bloodshed and slaughter, and were then defeated by the Romans in a pitched battle, where not only Tullus lost his life, but the principal flower of their whole army was cut in pieces, so that they were forced to submit and accept of peace upon very dishonorable terms, becoming subjects of Rome and pledging themselves to submission.